On a seemingly normal night in New York, Craig is cycling on a bridge when he suddenly halts and doesn't bother to park his bike before climbing onto the abutment. He plans to end it, and as he maneuvers on top of a bustling road, he suddenly hears his baby sister, Alyssa. He turns to find his parents are there too, but instead of worrying about their son, his mother asks him about his bike. Craig looks baffled, because here he is trying to end it, and all his parents can think of is what shall happen to his bike, and how expensive it is. Alyssa, too, joins in claiming her sister privileges over the bike once she grows up. They don't stop there and call Craig selfish for not thinking about them, or how his actions might affect Alyssa, all the while referring to the bike. Craig starts apologizing, but gets blinded by an approaching truck's lights, and he suddenly loses his balance and falls. Only this was all a dream, a recurring dream where he would wake up all sweaty and panicking. However, this time it was different. Worried about his mental well-being, Craig visits the of a local hospital at 5 in the morning on a Sunday, and at the reception, he tells the receptionist that he wants to end. The receptionist is busy on the phone and hands him a form to fill out. Craig takes it, no questions asked. While waiting for his turn, he meets Bobby, who asks for a cigarette. When Craig tells him he doesn't have one, Bobby asks him what is wrong with him. But Bobby didn't mean it condescendingly, as Craig thinks initially. He's only asking the reason for Craig's visit to the So Craig opens up and describes vaguely about being stressed about the upcoming summer program application. Bobby interrupts him and asks why he's planning on going to school in the summer, when he should be having fun with girls on Kenai Island. Craig considers what Bobby just said for some time, before asking if he really is a doctor, because he sure is dressed like one. But Bobby shifts the conversation, and as he's about to leave, he tells Craig that he hopes the real doctors fix whatever is wrong with him. Craig is still confused about what just happened. Nevertheless, he thanks Bobby for his wishes. Craig is soon called in, and after a preliminary checkup, Dr. Mahmoud asks him how long he has been getting the self-destructive thoughts. Craig tells him that he has been depressed for about a year, and has had self-inflicting thoughts, but not with this intensity as he's lately been having. Dr. Mahmoud questions him about possible triggers, but Craig doesn't have a simple answer for this. He always struggles to explain the cause of his depression, because he feels his problems are less dramatic. For instance, his dad always seems to ask questions centered around academics, which Craig finds stressful, and it often induces stress vomiting. Sometimes even his friends look at him differently, which only adds to his stress. Craig also likes a girl. Okay, like may be an understatement. He is obsessed with a girl named Nia, who is dating Craig's best friend Aaron. So he is in the forbidden zone where he is not allowed to have feelings for his best friend's girlfriend, but he can't help it. Even with so many reasons, Craig chooses to keep his mouth shut. After learning that Craig has stopped taking his medication, Dr. Mahmoud concludes he isn't a threat to himself. He talks about calling his parents and talking to them to discuss a future course of action. However, Craig insists he needs help now. He feels that while everyone is able to handle the daily stressors, for Craig they're just piling up, ready to explode any moment. Craig pleads with the doctor to help him, as he doesn't want to go out and have a breakdown where he might end up doing something to him. Dr. Mahmoud sees helplessness in Craig's eyes and decides to admit him for 5 days, but to an adult psychiatric ward, because the psychiatric floor for adolescents is temporarily closed for renovations. The caretaker hands him a schedule for the week and advises him to contact his family so they can bring over the essential things he will require during his stay. Craig believes he won't need them, as he will not be staying there for long. But the caretaker can only give him a "you'll see" look. She asks him to hand over any sharp object and his belt and shoelaces before he's sent to meet Dr. Minerva. Dr. Minerva greets Craig and promises to talk to him after he's settled down. He soon crosses paths with Bobby, who is strolling around. Bobby takes him on the ward tour and tells him how things work there. While showing him the TV room, Craig spots Noel and asks Bobby, who tells him she is also a psychiatric patient. Craig is under the impression that Bobby works at the hospital, but when Bobby tells him he is there for the same reason as him, Craig is surprised. Craig is taken to his room, where he is introduced to Matata, his roommate. Matata, however, is not keen on meeting Craig, and doesn't bother getting up from his bed or as much as say hi. Craig sits in the room looking around when suddenly he's hit with the reality of the situation he's in, and feeling overwhelmed, he leaves the room. Just before Craig is about to leave, Matata speaks for the first time and asks him to switch off the lights on his way out. He finds Dr. Minerva in the corridor and asks to be released, as he can't risk his friends, and especially Nia, finding out about his commitment. Dr. Minerva looks at his papers, and upon reading that he is suffering from thoughts of self-harm and depression, she says they will need to keep him for 5 days under observation, to make sure he is safe. She adds that mental illness is nothing to be ashamed of. Craig understands and asks to talk to his mother, but to his surprise, his entire family is already there, after Dr. Minerva called them. His mother, Lynn, comes running to him and hugs him, looking worried. At this moment, Craig admits that his parents are not as villainous as he would often see them behaving in his dreams. Lynn is a little too fragile, while Craig's father George is always busy working, and his sister Alyssa is a child genius. And not that he's ever deprived of any affection. In fact, his family has been very supportive through everything that he's going through. Lynn apologizes for not understanding the gravity of the situation. However, Craig tries to reason out that he's having second thoughts about staying there because of how messed up some people are, like his roommate, who hasn't left his room for weeks. Lynn calms him and makes him understand that it is at the doctor's discretion, because they're professionals, and they can help Craig in ways that they, as parents, can't. Lynn also adds that the place looks nice, completely ignoring the yelling man behind them. Craig agrees to stay, but asks his parents not to tell any of his friends about it. Lynn promises, and hands him his bag with fresh new clothes and toiletries. Later, Craig joins Bobby in the cafeteria for lunch, where Bobby introduces him to two of his friends. It might have been their conversation, or that Noel was sitting at the adjoining table, or the taste of the hospital food, but something results in Craig throwing up at the table, leaving him embarrassed. Later, in his session with Dr. Minerva, he reveals he was seeing a shrink prior to getting admitted, and was on medication, but stopped taking them because he felt better. Dr. Minerva further questions him on how he felt before coming to the hospital. Craig tells her he was feeling depressed, stressed, anxious, and every other synonym, because of the Gates summer school application that his dad really wants him to go. The application is due in a week, but he hasn't even looked at it, because he is too scared that he'll fail to get admission. If that happens, then he wouldn't be able to put it on his college applications, which means he wouldn't get into a good college and land a good job, thus making him incapable of affording a good lifestyle or finding a girlfriend, and he'll end up getting depressed and stuck in a place like this hospital for the rest of his life. But of course, Craig says none of it, and instead says it is hard to explain. She asks if he has someone to talk to about these things, to which Craig mentions he has his friends and family, but it is not as simple. He further mentions that he has trouble eating and keeping himself from throwing up. Dr. Minerva asks him to join the group activities starting the next day, so they'll have a better assessment of his situation. It is his first day at the psychiatric ward, and Craig is already irked that he has to wake up next to a snoring, depressed Egyptian dude. Taking showers in a stall without a lock and lining up behind people suffering from various mental illnesses for medicines doesn't help either. He wishes he was in school, but he doesn't deny that the academic pressure got him here in the first place. He envies his parents' era, when they chose schools based on its proximity to their homes. But in today's world, academia has become subject-specific, and the competition is fierce. But the most competitive of all the public schools around New York is Executive Pre-Professional, Craig's school. Built on the principle of education for all, the school doesn't discriminate based on wealth. The only requirement is that the student must be one of the top 800 smartest and most accomplished students in the 5 boroughs. However, Craig feels it must have been a clerical mistake that he got an admission. But when his friends Aaron and Nia got in, Craig couldn't bear to see them grow closer in the school, eventually leading them to date each other. He wishes he was in Aaron's place, but it's just wishful thinking. At breakfast, Craig sits with Bobby and his friends. They're discussing bikes shown in the pictures of a magazine they're reading, and Bobby disses the idea as propaganda on how to live life. Before the conversation escalates, one of Bobby's friends, Humble, asks Craig if he is going to eat the burrito, as Craig doesn't show any eagerness. Craig asks him to take it, but Bobby suddenly becomes defensive and asks Humble to give it back, as Craig, too, needs to eat something. But when Humble doesn't give it back, Bobby yanks it from his plate and keeps it on Craig's plate. However, Craig refuses to eat, which makes Bobby stomp away in anger. Later, in a group meeting, Dr. Minerva talks about the incident and asks Bobby's other friend, Johnny, about the details, since he was an impartial observer. Johnny says Bobby has been on edge, probably because he is nervous about the interview, which is why he lashed out. Bobby doesn't like to be the topic of the discussion, and sarcastically asks Johnny to tell everyone about his hemorrhoid flare-up, too. Slowly, everyone starts giving their opinions, and as it turns out, Bobby is worried about the interview because he has nothing to wear except for the sweater he's wearing. Craig offers to bring one of his dad's shirts for Bobby, as his house is just 2 blocks away. Initially reluctant, Bobby accepts the offer, and this act of kindness makes Noel notice Craig. Later, when Craig is waiting for his turn to call home, he overhears Bobby arguing with his wife, who doesn't want him to meet his daughter. Just then, Noel passes by and drops a note for Craig, asking him to meet her at the bench that night. After Bobby slams the phone down and walks away, Craig rushes to hear the messages for him and gets a message from Nia, who asks if everything is fine, as he has been acting a bit weird lately. The second message is from Craig's science teacher, Mr. Reynolds, who is very unhappy about Craig's missing lab assignments and wants an explanation. Craig decides to pick the important one and calls back Nia, who has just finished filling out her Gates summer application. She asks why he wasn't at school that day. Craig can't bring himself to reveal much, so to make him feel better, Nia admits seeing a therapist for over a year now, and also reveals that she hasn't told this to anyone, not even Aaron. This makes Craig feel special, and he wants to continue talking. But as luck would have it, the other patients at the ward start swarming around him, and everyone has something to say. Craig can't let Nia find out, so he abruptly disconnects the call. He then meets his mom, who has brought the shirt for him. She apologizes on George's behalf, as he couldn't make it due to a client emergency. After they leave, Craig takes the shirt to Bobby's room and places it on the bed. While looking around, he sees Bobby's daughter's picture, and when Bobby suddenly walks in, Craig feels awkward. He explains he was just dropping the shirt, but Bobby starts talking about his 8-year-old daughter, Veronica. Craig asks Bobby what the interview is for, and Bobby tells him it is for a group home, which will be his new abode once he is relieved from the hospital. Craig offers him help practicing for the interview, since he has nothing better to do. To get the feel of it, Bobby wears the shirt and sits in a stiff posture, until Craig asks him to relax. As they start practicing, Craig realizes Bobby requires an entire crash course on how to answer the basic questions. Craig gives him prompts on how to answer questions, and how Bobby needs to show that he is bringing value to the group home if he gets accepted. Bobby thinks for a while, and starts eliminating all the choices Craig offers to him. Bobby knows he doesn't possess a great attitude, he doesn't clean up after himself, and he tries not to bring people's hopes up and then disappoint them. Craig calls Bobby pragmatic, and suggests he tell them that at the interview, making Bobby hopeful. That evening, Craig waits for Noel at 7, and soon she arrives. They start talking, and Craig notices cut marks on her arm, which she immediately covers up by pulling down her sleeves. She proposes they play a question game. They ask each other a series of questions, and get to know each other and the reason they are there. Noel reveals she has been there for 21 days, because her family fears she'll cut her again. They soon switch the game to a race to the art section, where the recreation director, Joni, welcomes Craig and asks him to use the supplies to draw something. When Craig shows hesitancy, Joni announces that Craig is having artist's block, which prompts the others to suggest all the things he could draw. When Noel remarks that Craig must have some crazy, messed up thoughts in his mind, he can't help but think about this one incident from his childhood when he was 5 years old. He already regarded himself as a failure because his 5-year-old self couldn't trace the map of Manhattan on the tracing paper. At that time, Lynn talked to him and explained he couldn't expect a freehand drawing to be perfect. But Craig couldn't take any of it, and argued that Mozart had composed 3 major symphonies by the time he was 5. To save him from self-criticism, Lynn suggested he create his own imaginary maps. Craig does exactly that in the art class, and creates a brain map. By the time he is almost done, everyone is surrounding him trying to make sense of what he has drawn, but Noel is long gone. Craig is soon sent for, as he has a call, and as soon as he hears the voice on the other end, he freezes. It is Aaron, his best friend. Craig can't wrap his head around the fact that Aaron can excel at every possible thing. He is an academic genius with a knack for extracurricular activities. Aaron asks him what he's doing in an adult psychiatric ward, and claims that there is nothing wrong with him, and he just needs to chill more. However, Craig gets upset at his insensitive behavior and disconnects. He comes back to his room and lies on the bed, feeling upset that he has no friends. Hearing him whine, Matata matter-of-factly states that learning to live with this truth is a very hard thing. He then turns and falls asleep, leaving Craig with a thought to ponder upon. The next day at Craig's school, the teacher realizes someone neglected to turn in their GATES summer application, and mockingly asks the class who doesn't want to study at such a prestigious school, which is a golden ticket to a good college, a way to get a good job, earn better, and probably get laid. She wonders who that one student is, who wants to end up depressed in a psych ward, sleeping next to a social reject named Matata. Craig wakes up from this freakish nightmare and stares at the snoring Matata. After getting ready, Craig is on his way to the TV room when he sees Bobby being yelled at by his wife, and his daughter, witnessing it all. The staff member, Smitty, soon intervenes and asks Bobby's wife to leave, and without any hesitation, she grabs Veronica and stomps away. When Bobby comes out of the TV room, he sees Craig and explains the woman was his accountant, who goes nuts at the slightest mistakes. The next day, George and Lynn come to visit Craig, but Craig is not happy to see George, who is there only to tell him that he got an extension for him on the GATES summer application. Later that day, Craig is in the common area when Bobby walks in with his shirt tied to his head. He has a full-blown meltdown when Craig asks how his interview went. He is taken away by security while Craig looks at him helplessly. During Craig's session with Dr. Minerva, she asks him how he felt, seeing Bobby in such a vulnerable state. Craig admits feeling scared, not of Bobby hurting him, but of him blowing up like that, and admits that sometimes he too feels like he's on the verge of blowing up, with all the stress and pressure bubbling up, because he doesn't have anybody he can share his thoughts with. Dr. Minerva asks if it was always the case, but Craig says he was okay when he was a child, and narrates how things felt different in the 8th grade. Together with his best friend Aaron, he spent the day riding bikes. Everything seemed perfect, till girls, grades, parents, 2 wars, environmental catastrophe, and the messed up economy all at once came out of nowhere on the same day. Dr. Minerva smiles and shifts the subject to his parents. Craig starts with his dad, and complains that he is here, and his dad has nothing better to offer than GATES school. He feels that something big is coming. He doesn't know what exactly, but he is sure it is big. After the session, Craig meets Bobby, who returns the shirt Craig gave him, and looks all right after his little episode. They sit at the cafeteria, and Bobby tells Craig about one of the patients, who, prior to being committed there, was a radical academic at Columbia. When the government passed the Patriot Act, she went crazy because she thought that Bush put bugs in all the phones. He points to the other patient, named Solomon. 100 tablets of acid in a day and hasn't been the same ever since. However, when Craig asks about him, Bobby becomes serious and deflects the topic. The following day they have a musical activity, and everybody participates with a musical instrument except Craig. So their instructor calls Craig up in front for the vocals. After much persuasion, Craig takes the mic, and even though everyone plays off key, Craig replaces the sound with the actual rhythm of the song in his mind, and brings out his inner rock star. By the time he finishes singing, he has officially become the rock star, as everybody cheers for him while Noel hugs him. Before going to bed, Craig talks to Nia, who lately seems more interested and promises to visit him. The following day, Bobby wakes Craig and asks him to wear the staff dress he has bought for him. They disguise themselves as the staff members, and after bribing the security guard with pills, the two enjoy playing basketball on the court. While resting after the game, Bobby asks if he has feelings for Noel, since he clearly sees chemistry between the two. Craig admits he likes her, but is too afraid of rejection. To help him overcome fear, Bobby pretends to be Noel and makes Craig ask him out. After practicing for a bit, Craig again tries to ask why Bobby is there, but this time, he asks firmly. Bobby still doesn't want to disclose it, until Craig admits to overhearing his wife talking about how he tried to end it. Bobby confesses he tried it 6 times, but failed. Craig opens up about having the same thoughts, which made him come to the hospital to seek help. Bobby asks what stopped him, and Craig says it was the thought of his family, and what would happen to them if he took such a drastic step. This makes Bobby open up, and he makes Craig realize how blessed he is. He is smart, has a loving family who supports him, and he wishes he could get to live Craig's life, even if it is for a day, because he would make the most of it. Craig thinks about it for a long time, even as they walk back to the ward. But Craig is in for a surprise when he sees Matata standing at the door in a dilemma. Craig suddenly feels the need to help Matata overcome his fear of the outside, and encourages him by telling him about all the activities they have for the patients. Hearing they have music, Matata says he likes Egyptian music. Just then, Solomon walks up to them, asking them to be quiet, and that is it for Matata. He has had enough exposure for the day, and he walks back to his bed. That night, Craig is busy drawing in the TV room when he hears Nia's voice. He is surprised to see her standing before him. Nia tells him she broke up with Aaron and sits beside him, making Craig's hormones dance. She confesses that she has been thinking about him a lot since the day they talked over the phone. She calls Craig mature for dealing with such a problem on his own, unlike their classmates, who whine about every little thing. Craig tries resisting, even though Nia gives him all the classic signs of being interested in him. So Craig invites her to see his room, and when they get there, Matata is not on his bed. Taking the opportunity, Nia starts kissing him. And things get steamy, but a lid is put on it when they hear the toilet flush, and Matata walks out. This makes Craig stressed, and he barfs. If this wasn't enough, Matata tries to shoo away Nia, calling her a temptress. Nia barges out of the room, and Craig rushes after her. He tries to stop her and confesses he loves her, but Nia rudely asks him to get some help. Noel witnesses all this, but before Craig can do any damage control, she too stomps away, after throwing away the portrait she had bought for Craig. Craig tries talking to Noel and apologizes that he messed up, but Noel doesn't open her door, and Craig returns to his room, disappointed by how things turned out. It is Thursday, and Craig doesn't show up for breakfast. Bobby comes to check on him and tells him that he got into a home. But when Craig doesn't react much, Bobby realizes it must be because of the Nia-Noel fiasco. Bobby tells Craig that he was like Craig when he was of the same age, but he was better looking, and didn't have as much trouble with women. He doesn't want Craig to just give up on life because things don't go as he intends. This encourages Craig to take control of things, and he draws a map with 2 cities interconnecting, and asks Noel to meet him in their usual meeting spot. That day, when Craig talks to Dr. Minerva, he confesses he hasn't been more appreciative of what he has, like his family, home, and friends. He shows her his drawings and says art is something he enjoys, as it takes his mind away from everything. He has decided to continue the art and talk to his dad, even if it means bearing his dad freaking out about his choice. Since it is Bobby and Craig's last day at the hospital, Craig asks Smitty if they can have a pizza party for everyone. Later, Craig waits for Noel, and she shows up, still hesitant about what happened. Craig confesses how he was obsessed with Nia, but realized he doesn't love her. He confesses to Noel that he likes her, and that she doesn't hide her problems like everyone else, which helps him come forward with his problems when he is around her. They soon make up, and Craig takes Noel on one of his adventures. They sneak out of the ward and onto the terrace. They talk about the kind of music they like, and Noel invites Craig to a show by Vampire Weekend. They talk a great deal about other things, and they end up kissing. Later that night, Craig arranges pizza with the help of his parents and asks Aaron to deliver him a package. Aaron soon arrives with the package and apologizes for not being understanding enough. He pleads with Craig not to harm him, and for the first time, Craig feels he is cared for. Craig then goes to Bobby's room to invite him to the pizza party, but Bobby isn't very keen on joining them. So Craig gives him a parting gift, a drawing of a map with a building under construction, named Bobby. Craig wishes him goodnight before leaving, and Bobby wishes Craig good luck for his future. Craig then goes to the dining area, where everyone is dancing and enjoying pizza. Craig is happy everyone is having a good time and walks over to Smitty. He hands Smitty the vinyl from the package he received from Aaron, and asks him to play it. Smitty changes the song, and everybody groans. The music starts growing on them though, and sure enough, Matata shows up for the first time and starts dancing. Bobby also arrives to see everyone one last time, but doesn't join them. He feels happy that Craig was able to overcome his problems, and he even helped others. It is the day of Craig's discharge. Craig's new friends bid him goodbye in their own way. Craig has a smile as he looks forward to biking, eating, drinking, talking, riding the subway, reading maps, making art, ripping up the Gates application, telling his dad not to stress about it, hugging his mom, kissing his sister, making out with Noel, spending time with her and his friends, partying, volunteering and helping people like Bobby and Matata, traveling, swimming, skipping, and just living the moment.